Kathleen stood outside Angela's quaint apartment, her heart fluttering with excitement. Today, they were to finalize the dress for her 5th wedding anniversary, a milestone she wanted to celebrate in style. She rang the bell, the sound echoing slightly in the crisp afternoon air. Angela opened the door, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Kathleen, come in, come in. I've been waiting for you," she exclaimed, her voice a melodic chime. As Kathleen stepped inside, she was enveloped by the cozy warmth of Angela's home, a stark contrast to the nippy autumn breeze outside. The living room was an artist's haven, with fabrics of various hues and textures draped elegantly around the space, and sketches of dress designs adorning the walls. "Angela, this place. It's just as magical as ever," Kathleen said, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "Oh, you always know how to make me blush," Angela replied, leading her friend to the makeshift studio in the corner. "Now, let's talk about your dress. You must be the belle of the ball." They pored over fabrics, discussing hues that would complement Kathleen's porcelain complexion. Angela suggested a deep emerald green, a colour that made Kathleen's hazel eyes stand out strikingly. Emerald green. "Nicholas loves that colour on me," Kathleen mused, her mind drifting to her husband. She cherished the thought of his reaction when he'd see her in the dress. "Yes, and I remember him saying at your last party how it reminds him of your eyes," Angela recalled, her hands skillfully folding the silky fabric. Their conversation flowed effortlessly as they moved on to the design. Kathleen wanted something elegant yet modern, a dress that said celebration but whispered romance. How about an off-shoulder design with a fitted bodice flowing into a soft, flaring skirt? "It's timeless," Angela suggested, sketching rapidly as she spoke. Kathleen leaned over to see the sketch, her heart leaping at the vision taking shape on paper. "It's perfect, Angela. It's exactly how I imagined." As they sipped on Earl Grey tea, the conversation veered from the dress to memories of their college days, to updates about mutual friends. Time slipped away unnoticed, wrapped in the warmth of friendship and laughter. Suddenly, Kathleen glanced at the clock. "Oh my, it's already 6 p.m. Nicholas will be wondering where I am." Time does fly when you're having fun. But go on, you don't want to keep the man waiting. "Especially today," Angela said, her eyes twinkling. Kathleen hugged her friend tightly. "Thank you, Angela. Today wouldn't have been half as special without this." Stepping out into the now dusky evening, Kathleen felt a mix of contentment and urgency. She couldn't wait to see Nicholas and tell him about her day. Little did she know, her simple journey home would soon take an unexpected turn, altering the course of her evening, and potentially much more. As Kathleen left Angela's apartment, the sky had transformed from a dusky orange to a somber grey. A light drizzle began to fall, quickly intensifying into a heavy downpour. She hurried to her car, the raindrops drumming a rapid rhythm on the roof. Inside the car, Kathleen switched on the wipers, their steady swish-swish barely keeping up with the relentless rain. She navigated the slick streets with care, her thoughts on Nicholas. "He must be wondering where I am," she muttered to herself, her fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. Suddenly, a figure darted into the road, obscured by the curtain of rain. Kathleen's heart leapt into her throat as she slammed on the brakes, her car skidding slightly but stopping just in time. A man soaked to the skin stood frozen in the glare of the headlights. "Oh my God! Are you okay?" Kathleen called out, rolling down her window. The man, recovering from his initial shock, approached the car. He was tall and ruggedly handsome, his drenched clothes clinging to him. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a bit wet," he said, attempting a sheepish smile. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. Please let me make it up to you. Can I drive you somewhere?" Kathleen offered, feeling responsible. "No, it's my fault. I wasn't looking. But, if you could drop me off at the next block, "That'd be great," he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. "I insist," Kathleen said firmly, unlocking the passenger door. The man hesitated for a moment before nodding and getting into the car. As they drove, Kathleen stole glances at her unexpected passenger. "I'm Kathleen, by the way," she said, breaking the silence. "Gary," he replied, offering a hand. They made small talk about the weather and the city, the conversation light but pleasant. When they reached the destination, Gary thanked her and was about to leave when Kathleen, driven by a sense of guilt and hospitality, said, "Listen, you're soaked and it's still pouring. Why don't you come up to my apartment for a bit? Dry off." Gary looked at her, a mix of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition. I'd feel terrible just leaving you like this," Kathleen insisted, her tone warm and sincere. After a moment's hesitation, Gary agreed. As they walked to Kathleen's apartment, the rain still pouring down around them. Neither of them realized that this chance encounter was the beginning of a series of events that would unveil hidden truths and test Kathleen's beliefs in ways she never imagined. Inside Kathleen's cozy apartment, the rain's persistent drumming against the windows created a contrast to the warm, inviting interior. Gary stood awkwardly on the doormat, dripping onto the wooden floor. "Let me get you a towel. Make yourself at home," Kathleen said, disappearing into another room. Gary looked around, taking in the tasteful decor, the walls adorned with art and shelves filled with books and mementos. His eyes were drawn to a photo on the mantel, a smiling Kathleen with a man, their arms wrapped around each other, radiating happiness. Kathleen returned with a towel and a dry shirt. "Here you go. The bathroom's just down the hall if you want to change." "Thanks," Gary said, gratefully accepting them. He hesitated before adding, "Is that your brother in the photo? You two look close." Kathleen, who was just pouring some tea, paused and turned to look at the photo. "Oh, that's not my brother. That's Nicholas, my husband." A flicker of recognition, then confusion, crossed Gary's face. "Your husband? But that can't be. He's involved with my neighbor, Christine. She's pregnant, and everyone knows Nicholas is the father." Kathleen's hand trembled slightly, the teacup making a soft clinking sound as it touched the saucer. "I think you must be mistaken, Gary. Nicholas is my husband, and I'm sure I'd know if something like that were going on." Gary, now realizing the gravity of his words, fumbled for a response. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. It's just that Christine often talks about her partner Nicholas. I just assumed." Kathleen forced a smile, though her mind was reeling. "It's okay. It must be a misunderstanding." Gary excused himself to the bathroom, leaving Kathleen alone with her thoughts. The seeds of doubt were sown. The idea that Nicholas could be living a double life was absurd. Yet Gary's words echoed in her mind. She remembered the late nights, the unexplained absences, Nicholas's increasing secrecy with his... When Gary returned, the atmosphere had shifted. Kathleen was lost in thought, her usual warmth tempered by a veil of concern. "Everything okay?" Gary asked tentatively. Kathleen looked up, her expression a mix of forced composure and hidden turmoil. "Yes, it's just been a long day. Thank you for the company, Gary. I should probably get some rest." Gary nodded, sensing her desire to be alone. "Of course. Thank you for your kindness, Kathleen." After he left, Kathleen sat in the dimly lit living room, the shadows seeming to mirror the doubts darkening her thoughts. The image of Nicholas and Christine haunted her, a scenario she could neither fully believe nor dismiss. The night stretched on, with Kathleen trapped in a whirlwind of confusion and fear, wondering if the life she cherished was nothing but a facade. In the days following Gary's revelation, Kathleen found herself observing Nicholas with a scrutinous eye. His every action, once familiar and endearing, now seemed laced with possible deceit. One evening, as they sat in their living room, Kathleen decided to broach the subject that had been haunting her. "Nicholas, have you been finding work more demanding lately?" she asked, her voice steady but laden with hidden meaning. Nicholas, looking up from his book, replied, "It has been hectic, yes." Kathleen fiddled with her teacup, choosing her words carefully. "It's just that you've been coming home late so often. I miss our evenings together." Nicholas smiled softly, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "I miss them too. But this project is really important for my career. It won't be like this forever, I promise." Kathleen wanted to believe him, to let the matter rest, but Gary's words echoed in her mind, sowing seeds of doubt she couldn't ignore. The next day, Kathleen met Gary by chance at the local coffee shop. The encounter felt like a sign, compelling her to confide in him. "Gary, I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night," she began, her voice a mix of anxiety and resolve. Gary looked at her with concern. "Kathleen, if I've caused any trouble..." "No, it's not your fault. But I need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Kathleen's eyes pleaded for an ally in her quest for clarity. After a moment's hesitation, Gary agreed. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" Kathleen outlined a plan to observe Nicholas's activities to find proof of his fidelity or betrayal. "I just need to know if he really goes to work when he says he does, or if he's meeting someone else." So began their covert operations. They would discreetly follow Nicholas, take note of his stops, his interactions. Each day, Kathleen felt a mix of dread and desperation, hoping for innocence but preparing for guilt. Their efforts culminated one evening when Gary called Kathleen with a trembling voice. "Kathleen, I'm outside Christine's place. Nicholas is here. He just went in." Kathleen felt as if the ground had slipped from beneath her. "Are you sure it's him?" "Yes, I'm sure. I'm sorry, Kathleen." The revelation hit Kathleen like a physical blow. The life she knew, the love she cherished, now seemed tainted with lies. Consumed by a storm of betrayal and heartache, she made a hasty decision. She confronted Nicholas that night, her words cold and final, her heart breaking with each accusation. Nicholas, taken aback, tried to explain, but Kathleen's mind was made up. She couldn't live with doubt and suspicion. She asked for a separation, her voice void of the warmth it once held for him. As Nicholas left their home, a shell of the man she once loved, Kathleen collapsed into a chair, her world shattered. The shadow of deception had crept into her life, leaving her to grapple with the fragments of a once perfect love. The days following the separation were a blur for Kathleen. The apartment felt empty, the silence a stark reminder of the void Nicholas's absence had created. She moved through her days mechanically, her heart weighed down by a heavy mix of grief and betrayal. One evening, as she aimlessly flipped through a photo album, her phone rang. It was Gary. "Kathleen, are you okay? I've been worried about you," he said, his voice laced with concern. Kathleen sighed, the sound heavy with sorrow. "I'm just trying to make sense of it all. How could I have been so blind, Gary?" "You weren't blind, Kathleen. Sometimes we just see what we want to," Gary replied gently. Kathleen felt a pang of gratitude for Gary's support, but it was overshadowed by her heartache. "What do I do now, Gary? My whole life feels like a lie." "In time, you'll find a way to move on. You're strong, Kathleen. You'll get through this," Gary reassured. But Kathleen wasn't so sure. The doubt and uncertainty had taken a toll on her. She hung up the phone, feeling more alone than ever. A few days later, Kathleen's brother-in-law, David, a police officer, dropped by unexpectedly. "Kathleen, we need to talk," he said, his expression serious. "What is it, David? Is everything okay?" Kathleen asked, a sense of dread settling in her. David hesitated before speaking. "I've been doing some digging. There's something you need to know about Gary and your colleague Janet." Kathleen listened in disbelief as David unveiled the truth. Gary and Janet had conspired together, fueled by Janet's envy and Gary's greed, to create the illusion of Nicholas's infidelity. It was all a setup, Kathleen. The visits to Christine's place, the phone calls, they orchestrated everything, David revealed. Kathleen felt the room spin around her, the betrayal, the lies. It was all a twisted plot. But why? Why would they do this to me? Jealousy, money, who knows? People have their reasons. But none of them are good enough, David said, his voice filled with anger. Kathleen sat there, numb, the magnitude of the deception overwhelming her. Her marriage, her trust, her entire world had been manipulated by those she considered friends. I need to find Nicholas, she said suddenly, a sense of urgency taking hold of her. I need to tell him the truth. But fate had a cruel twist in store. David's next word stopped her cold. Nicholas had an accident, Kathleen. He's in the hospital. The news hit Kathleen like a tidal wave. All her anger, her pride, vanished in an instant, replaced by a deep, aching concern for the man she still loved. She rushed to the hospital, her mind racing with apologies and confessions. She found Nicholas in a hospital bed, his leg in a cast, looking vulnerable and alone. Nicholas, I'm so sorry, she began, tears streaming down her face. Nicholas looked up, his eyes reflecting a mix of pain and confusion. Kathleen. Kathleen took his hand, her words pouring out in a torrent of emotion. It was all a lie. Nicholas, Gary, Janet, they tricked me. I should have trusted you. Can you ever forgive me? Nicholas, still processing the revelations, squeezed her hand. I just don't understand. Why would they do this? I don't know, but it doesn't matter now. I just need you to know the truth. I love you, Nicholas, and I was wrong to doubt you, Kathleen sobbed. Nicholas, his expression softening, pulled her closer. We'll get through this, Kathleen. In that hospital room, amidst the pain and betrayal, a flicker of hope ignited. They had a long road ahead, but for the first time since the ordeal began, Kathleen felt they might just find their way back to each other. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, Nicholas and Kathleen sat together, a fragile silence hanging between them. The revelations from David had left them both reeling, struggling to grasp the extent of the deceit they had fallen victim to. Kathleen broke the silence, her voice quivering. Nicholas, I don't even know where to start. I've been so foolish. Nicholas, his expression a mix of hurt and understanding, turned to her. Kathleen, why? Why did you believe them over me? Kathleen's eyes brimmed with tears. I don't know. I was scared, confused. Gary seemed so genuine, and then everything just spiraled out of control. Nicholas sighed, a deep, weary sound. I knew something was off when Gary showed up out of nowhere. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Kathleen reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his. I should have come to you. We should have faced this together. Nicholas nodded, a bitter smile on his lips. It's hard, Kathleen, to think that people we trusted could weave such a web of lies. The conversation turned to Janet and Gary, their motive still a baffling mystery. I never would have suspected Janet. She was always so kind, so helpful, Kathleen murmured. And Gary, Nicholas added. He was always around, offering help with projects, eager to be involved. I never saw it as anything more than neighborly friendliness. They sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts, until Kathleen's resolve hardened. We need to confront them, Nicholas. We need closure. Together, they planned their confrontation. Once Nicholas was discharged, they arranged to meet Janet and Gary. The meeting was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Why, Janet? Why did you do this? Kathleen asked, her voice steady but filled with pain. Janet looked down, unable to meet Kathleen's gaze. I was jealous, Kathleen. You had everything, a great career, a loving husband. I wanted that. I thought if I could break you up, I could have a chance with Nicholas. And you, Gary? Why? Nicholas's voice was cold, hard. Gary shifted uncomfortably. Money. I was in debt, and Janet promised me a way out if I... The confessions hung in the air, a stark testament to the depths of their betrayal. Kathleen and Nicholas listened, their expressions a blend of disgust and disbelief. Finally, Kathleen spoke, her voice laced with finality. We trusted you, both of you, and you used that against us. I hope it was worth it. With that, they walked away, leaving Janet and Gary to their remorse. The web of deception had been unravelled, but the damage it had caused was indelible. As they left, Nicholas took Kathleen's hand. We have a lot to work through, but I think we can make it if we try. Kathleen nodded, a small, hopeful smile breaking through her tears. Yes, we can. Their walk back was a journey of healing, the first step in rebuilding the trust and love that had been so cruelly manipulated. The road ahead would be challenging, but they were ready to face it, united in their resolve to overcome the shadows of deception. Months had passed since the day Kathleen and Nicholas walked out of that painful confrontation with Janet and Gary. The seasons had changed, and so had their lives. The wounds were still there, healing slowly, but their love had proved resilient. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat on their balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset, Nicholas broke the comfortable silence. Kathleen, do you remember our first anniversary? We promised each other to always find a way back to love, no matter what. Kathleen nestled closer to him, her eyes reflecting the hues of the fading light. I remember. It feels like a lifetime ago. Nicholas sighed, a reflective note in his voice. We've been through so much. It scares me how close we came to losing everything. Kathleen turned to face him, her hand gently caressing his cheek. But we didn't lose, Nicholas. We fought through the lies, the pain. We're here together, and that's what matters. Nicholas took her hand, pressing it to his lips. I've been thinking about us, our future. I don't want to let the shadows of the past darken our path anymore. Kathleen's heart skipped a beat. What are you saying? I'm saying let's renew our vows. Let's celebrate our love, not just for what it endured, but for how it blossomed again. Stronger, deeper, Nicholas proposed, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Kathleen's response was a teary smile, a mix of joy and relief. Yes, let's do that. Let's start anew. Plans were made, and the day arrived under a canopy of clear blue skies. Surrounded by close friends and family in their small, beautifully decorated backyard, Kathleen and Nicholas stood hand in hand, ready to reaffirm their commitment to each other. As they recited their vows, their voices were steady but laden with emotion. I vow to trust you, to respect you, to learn and grow with you. To always find my way back to you, Kathleen promised, her eyes locked onto Nicholas's. And I vow to be your sanctuary, your partner in all of life's adventures. To cherish our love, our bond, in sunshine and in storms. Nicholas replied, his grip on her hands firm and reassuring. The ceremony was simple but profoundly meaningful. It was a celebration, not just of a union, but of triumph over adversity, of love's enduring power. Later, as the guests mingled and laughed, Kathleen and Nicholas stole a quiet moment for themselves. They stood together, looking at the people they loved, their hearts filled with gratitude. Thank you for believing in us, for fighting for us, Nicholas whispered. Kathleen leaned in, her head resting on his shoulder. We did it together. That's what makes this so special. They knew the journey ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, but they also knew they had something unbreakable, a bond forged in the fires of adversity, a love that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. In that moment, as they stood in each other's arms, Kathleen and Nicholas knew they were ready to embrace this new beginning, to write the next chapters of their life together, filled with hope, love, and the promise of endless possibilities.